I'm Lily, and just a few months ago, my life seemed perfect, or at least it was supposed to be. I had just married Larry, a man 9 years older than me. On the surface, everything was idyllic. We had a beautiful wedding, a new house just outside the city, and from the outside looking in, people thought we were the perfect couple. But behind closed doors, something was wrong. I couldn't pinpoint it right away. Larry, once so attentive and loving, had become distant, cold. He started coming home late, offering vague excuses about work. We stopped talking the way we used to. At first, I thought it was just the typical struggles of adjusting to married life. But the distance grew wider with each passing day, and I found myself wondering if I really knew the man I had married. Something was off, terribly off, and I couldn't shake the feeling that a storm was brewing. I met Larry when I was 20, at one of those high society garden parties our families were known for. Larry was already a rising star at his father's company, and even back then, he had this air of confidence that drew me in. He was charming, attentive, and, in many ways, he swept me off my feet. I didn't expect to fall for him, but we clicked in ways I hadn't with anyone before. By the time I was 26, we were engaged, and soon after, we were married in a grand ceremony. My parents adored him, and I convinced myself that I did too. It all seemed so perfect. But looking back, I wonder if I was simply caught up in the whirlwind of his charm, if I had been too blinded by the fairy tale to see the cracks that were forming underneath. Now those cracks were splitting wide open, and I had no idea what to do. The first real sign that something was wrong came just after our honeymoon. We had spent 3 weeks in a luxurious beach resort, and for those few weeks, everything seemed fine. We were happy, or at least I thought we were. But the moment we returned home, things changed. Larry was distant, always distracted. He stopped coming home at the usual time, and when he did, he barely said a word to me. He was either too tired or too preoccupied to even talk. At first, I told myself it was work stress. Larry had a high-pressure job, and I knew it took a toll on him. But soon, his late nights turned into early mornings. He would come home when the sun was rising, barely offering an excuse. I was left in the dark, both literally and figuratively, wondering what had happened to the man I had married. The tension between us grew thicker, and it became impossible to ignore. One night, I decided I couldn't stay silent anymore. I had to confront him. We were sitting at the dinner table, the silence between us suffocating. I looked at him, my heart pounding, and asked the question I had been avoiding for weeks. "Larry, what's going on? Why are you always so distant? Is it work? Or is there someone else?" He looked up, startled, as if he hadn't expected me to say anything. His eyes were cold, empty, so different from the man I had fallen in love with. "It's just work, Lily," he said flatly, not even bothering to meet my gaze. "I'm busy, that's all." But I didn't believe him. I wanted to, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. His words felt rehearsed, too smooth, like he had practiced them in his head before saying them out loud. And that's when the doubt truly began to set in. The doubt gnawed at me day after day. I couldn't let go of the idea that something was deeply wrong. Larry's behavior only became more suspicious. He would spend more time out of the house, avoiding my questions, and we were barely sharing any meaningful conversations. It was as if we were living two separate lives under the same roof. I didn't want to accuse him of anything without proof, but my gut told me that I couldn't trust him anymore. And then one night, when he left his phone unattended on the kitchen counter, curiosity got the better of me. I knew it was wrong, but I was desperate for answers. I unlocked his phone and scrolled through his messages, emails, anything that might give me a clue. But there was nothing out of the ordinary. No incriminating messages, no suspicious calls, just the same old routine. And yet, I still felt uneasy, like there was something just beneath the surface that I couldn't see. Then, one day, I stumbled upon something that made my heart stop. Larry had been searching for apartments, multiple listings, all in different areas, some close to where we lived, others far away. Was he planning to leave me? My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Why would he be looking for a new place to live? We had just bought our house together. We had barely been married a year. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Was this his way of escaping? Of walking out without telling me? I confronted him that same evening, unable to keep my fear hidden any longer. Larry, why are you looking for apartments? Are you planning to leave me? His face drained of color, and for a moment, I saw something that looked like panic in his eyes. But then he quickly recovered, shaking his head. No, Lily, it's not what you think. I needed some space. That's all. Space? I repeated, my voice trembling. What do you mean, space? We're supposed to be building a life together, not growing further apart. He didn't have an answer, or at least not one that satisfied me. He mumbled something about needing time to think, to process everything. But his words felt hollow, empty, like he was saying them just to keep me quiet. And that's when I realized that this wasn't something I could fix on my own. I needed help. So I did something I never thought I would do. I hired a private investigator. His name was Tyler, a former police officer who had built a reputation for being discreet and thorough. I met with him in his office, telling him everything about Larry's strange behavior, the apartment searches, the distance between us. Tyler listened carefully, taking notes as I spoke. When I finished, he looked at me with a mix of sympathy and professionalism. "I'll find out what's going on, Lily," he said. "But be prepared. The truth might not be what you expect." The waiting was unbearable. Tyler warned me that it would take time to gather any useful information, but every day felt like an eternity. Larry's behavior didn't change. If anything, he seemed more distant than ever, almost as if he knew I was onto him. I tried to act normal, to keep up appearances, but inside, I was unraveling. My mind was constantly racing, imagining all the possible scenarios. What if he was cheating? What if he was planning to leave me for someone else? What if he had a whole other life I didn't know about? Every possibility seemed worse than the last, and the uncertainty was driving me mad. And then, after what felt like weeks of waiting, Tyler finally called. "Lily, I've got some information," he said, his voice serious. "I think you should come to the office." My heart sank. This was it, the moment I had been dreading. When I arrived at Tyler's office, I braced myself for the worst. I had mentally prepared for the possibility that Larry was cheating, that he had been lying to me all along. But when Tyler handed me the file, I was shocked by what I found. "There's no evidence that your husband is seeing anyone else," Tyler said, watching my reaction carefully. "But he is hiding something." I flipped through the pages, my hands trembling. Larry had been meeting with real estate agents, not just looking at apartments, but actively trying to buy one. And not just for himself. The property he was interested in was listed under a different name, a woman's name. But there were no photos of her, no messages, nothing that could confirm her identity. "Who is she?" I whispered, feeling the weight of the mystery growing heavier. Tyler shook his head. "I don't know, but I'm going to find out." Days turned into weeks as Tyler continued his investigation. In the meantime, I tried to confront Larry, but he was slippery, evasive. Every time I brought up the subject, he deflected, saying he was too busy or too tired to talk. It was like trying to hold on to water. It kept slipping through my fingers. I was starting to feel like I was losing my grip on reality. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't prove it. And then, out of nowhere, something unexpected happened. A man named John showed up at one of the charity events I was organizing. He was charming, handsome, and seemed genuinely interested in the cause. We started talking, and before long, he was asking me to lunch, offering to help with the foundation work. At first, I didn't think much of it, just a friendly gesture. But as the days went by, I started to notice something strange. John seemed to be everywhere I was, always watching, always a little too eager to please. I couldn't shake the feeling that John's sudden appearance was more than just a coincidence. It felt too perfect, too convenient. And then, the thought hit me. What if John was working for Larry? What if he had been sent to test me, to see if I would cheat and violate the prenup? It sounded crazy, but I couldn't ignore the possibility. I decided to hire Tyler again, this time to investigate John. I needed to know if he had any connection to Larry. Tyler agreed, though he looked skeptical. "You think your husband sent him?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "It's possible," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Larry's been distant, secretive, and now this guy shows up out of nowhere? It doesn't feel right." Tyler promised to look into it, and once again, I found myself waiting for answers. The suspense was killing me, but I had to know the truth. When Tyler finally came back with his report, my worst fears were confirmed. John was working for Larry. He had been hired to get close to me, to see if I would take the bait. It was all a setup. Azrania, a carefully orchestrated plan to catch me in an affair that didn't exist. But now that I knew the truth, I wasn't going to let them win. I decided to turn the tables. I played along, pretending to be interested in John, all while keeping my distance. I even staged a few photos that looked compromising, knowing full well that they would end up in Larry's hands. And sure enough, they did. Larry thought he had caught me, that he had won. But when he confronted me with the photos, I was ready. I revealed everything: John's connection to him, the real estate deals, the woman's name on the documents. Larry's face went pale, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. The game was over, and I had won.